Venezuela's economic crisis. Does it mean that the left is failed? First part. The international media now consolidate stories and corner writings about the collapse of the Venezuelan economy. Food and drug deficiencies. Eruptions due to several hours of lines for basic commodities. Three-digit inflation and even food riots have dominated the press. Traditional wisdom has a range of predictable stories to explain the current economic complexity. Socialism has failed. Remember that the vast majority of the employment created in Hugo Chavez is in the private sector, and that the size of the state is much smaller than in France. So the whole experiment failed from the beginning. According to this narrative, nationalizations, anti-trade policies, excessive populist overspending and high oil prices, and the collapse of oil prices since 2014 hindered Venezuela's fate. Fans of this statement say that the Chavez will continue to spin down until elected from power or removed by a coup. The truth is a bit more complicated. First, the Bolivarian experiment was quite good until 2014. Since 2004, real income per capita has grown more than 2% since the Chavez government took control over the national oil industry by 2014. This is a tremendous change in the terrible long-term decline in per capita GDP, which actually declined by 1.2% per year over the past 20 years from Chavez. During those same years, poverty fell by 49% and extreme poverty by 63%. It is considered only cash income. The number of people over the age of 60 who receive public pension has tripled and has benefited millions of Venezuelan health and education services. Chavez's achievements in this decade revealed that the United Socialist Party of Venezuela could earn 41% of the votes in the National Assembly elections in December 2015, despite the serious shortage of consumer goods, 180% inflation and 180% inflation. Deep recession. Now, for the last 3 years, in the downward spiral of the economy, was this inevitable? And is the PSUV irreversible until it releases power? To find answers to these questions, we need to look at how Venezuela is entering and exiting this situation. Venezuela's economic stagnation tailed in the autumn of 2012 and again in February 2013. The government sharply reduced foreign exchange purchases. With inflation and the dollar's black market price, the main commodity strain accelerated during this time. The official exchange rate at which the state sold the vast majority of the dollar earned from oil sales was at 6.3 bolívares fuertes BS.F per dollar. But a parallel market was already available and the dollar was tight in parallel with the dollar's tightness in the picture. At the same time, the dollar raised the inflation rate parallel to the parallel market price because it increased the price of imported goods. And when inflation rises, the dollar wants to buy dollars because they see the dollar as a safe thing to lose. But this raises inflation even further by raising the price of the dollar in parallel markets. This cycle continues and causes the inflation lowering spiral. In October 2012 inflation was 18% and the parallel market rate was 13%. By the end of 2015, annual inflation was 180% and the parallel market rate was 833%. The shortage of consumer and other goods is also contributing to this spiral and has increased with it. Despite the international oil price of over $100, the Venezuelan economy was already stagnant as of the first quarter of 2014. By January 2015 prices were down to 48 barrels and today are at the same level. It reduced the government's income in a similar way and tried to push money to cover government costs. The creation of money does not accelerate inflation, but it certainly did in the context of inflation depreciation spiral. Thus inflation became even higher. Since the end of March, the parallel market interest rate has risen from 1,211 to 1,025. With the dollar falling by 15%, as measured into local currency, after more than 3 years of rapid growth. At the same time, the government allowed the price of a third dollar called the SIMABI or DICOM rate to rise. Now about 640 PS. Or it constitutes more than 60% of the parallel market ratio. However, this does not mean that the economy is on the way to becoming stable. First, the parallel rate is still 100 times higher than the official rate below 10. Second, deepening recession has been one of the main things slowing down the decline in inflation. There are very few people who make money to buy dollars, and many are spending their dollar savings to buy the needs. It pulled down the price of dollars on the parallel market. This means that the Venezuelan economy is improving under the current exchange rate system. He's stuck in the occupation. In addition, the multiple exchange rate system, which has large disparities between different currencies, creates a tremendous incentive for corruption. Anyone with access to the official dollar can raise their revenue to 100 times by selling on the black market, which is almost universally accessible. But the official exchange rate system is a way for the government to lose its dollar income. Gasoline, even after the recent price increases of about 6 bs per liter, or about US dime per liter in ABI exchange rate. Electricity and gas are also subsidized in large quantities. These subsidies give the government more than 13% of GDP. For comparison, the U.S. federal government's total income tax in 2015 was about 10.6% of GDP. At the same time, the current economic situation has difficult or impossible price controls to protect. Overall consumer prices increased 180% in 2015. Food prices, subject to price controls, increased by 300%. This is a pretty clear indication that price controls do not work. Possible road to recovery: millions of Venezuelans are now sort of mediating their lives, waiting and selling for hours to distribute subsidized food in small quantities, making trade currency in parallel, selling stolen goods. Even the dictatorship, which is a serious oppressive force to undermine all illegal transactions, will suffer from maintaining an economy that operates with the magnitude of these price distortions. But Venezuela is not a dictatorship. In fact, the state is very weak in terms of law enforcement. Given this situation, it is clear that serious reforms must be made to restart the economy. The Union of South America (UNASUR) has formed an economist team led by Leonel Fernandez, former president of the Dominican Republic. The most obvious change needed is to combine multiple exchange rate systems. This should be done quickly and in one step. The government may auction a fixed amount every day at the price set by supply and demand. Allowing the disappearance of currencies to be lost seems to be terrible for most people, but the price of the dollar will undoubtedly be stabilized at a level lower than about 1,000 parallel markets. The floating rate is also the only way to prevent waste of foreign currency reserves in vain for the protection of an overvalued fixed exchange rate. Since devaluations cause price increases in general, people will need to be protected from the rising costs of basic goods, including food. This could be done with a wider expansion of the government's existing target socialist system, which would provide a huge discount to people that could compensate for any price increases. This system will be in place before the exchange rate is